to a central region like Nagpur. So basically, what we are going to discuss today is something that has become very a hot topic today, I should say, especially with the advent of the coronavirus and the kind of quarantine that we faced for 2 years from 2020 onwards. That is the novel COVID virus. Since the pandemic, a lot of people have been showing a lot of interest in this particular theory that we dub as posthumanism. Of course, posthumanism has been down with us through the ages, but it's only after 2020 that it has become so relevant, and a lot of interest has been, kind of garnered on this particular theory, because I think this is a theory that lies at the crossroads of three very important intersections. One, of course, is the question of human identity as such. What constitutes humanity? What exactly is an identity? And how we, especially the postmodern and the post-structuralist generation, how do we handle the ideas and conceptions of something that is called human identity? Now, this is one burning question, which, if you see vis-a-vis the kind of era that we live in, the era of digital humanities, the era of digital information, and of course, the era of technology. So how do we handle a sociological imperative like, let's say, human identity in an era that is very post-digital and, technology-oriented, where either you have to be technologically savvy to survive or you become obsolete, you become a part of a cave person, a barbarian. And then you mix all this into the hopscotch that is called posthumanism. So, as I said, our discussion today is going to be somewhere there, in those intersectionalities between posthumanism, technology, and human identity. Of course, I'm sure all of us already know that, what exactly is posthumanism as a concept. As I said, posthumanism has been in vogue right from the 1880s onwards, at the end of the age of enlightenment, when people were questioning the idea of what constitutes a human essence. It was during the age of enlightenment when people started coming up with a lot of bandying terms like humanism, the human essence, the humanity, and ethics. So it was a time when, sort of people were saying that, religion is no longer necessary with the advent of science. We are going to talk more about the idea of a human soul and how it sort of helps in the generation of what is called empathy, sympathy, or, the human virtues, the human values as such. But as long as we have talked about the idea of a universal brotherhood or the idea of a universal humanism, there have always been other constructs also which go side by side. For example, it was a time when the age of enlightenment was much in vogue that colonization also became rapid, became fervently so much, all around the world, in your face. So if I have to talk about something like imperialism or, let's say, colonization, we also have to talk about the accompanying terminologies like, let's say, racism. So how are we going to sort of incorporate the idea of a human materialism or human essentialism with the idea of racism? It does not gel. There is always a paradox when we talk about on one hand, the idea of brotherhood or the idea of humanism, and then on the other hand, you very categorically, very, very systematically, what you do is you segregate a particular section of the human population. So how does it gel? This is one question that has always been there. But with posthumanism, which of course follows the Derridian turn of post-structuralism, we are asking certain fundamental questions like, is human centralism or is human centrality the necessary thing for us to survive as a species? Has it actually benefited us in any way? Has it actually benefited the earth, the world, the sphere in any way? This is a fundamental question that post-humanism always asks. So basically, if there is a parameter that you have to attach, to fix to the idea of post-humanism, the first thing that we look at is how we decenter or how we deconstruct the idea of the humane, the idea of the centralization of the human person, the Homo sapien as such. Because I think we need to ask a very fundamental question: what does it mean to be human in these times? I mean, we live in an age where we see the dismantling of every humanist project. We are talking about, how technology has sort of elevated us to a plane that is beyond the inconceivable, but at the same time, we also see that there is something that is hollow about the entire ideology of humanism. Something which a modernist poet like T.S. Eliot probably, talked about with a lot of emphasis in his great poems like The Hollow Men, or something like The Wasteland. But it was more of a pinpointing of certain themes out there. But when it comes to post-humanism, it's about you bring all that in a platter and you present that to the human population in general. So how exactly are we going to look at the 21st century or our contemporary century, where we have basically destroyed everything? We live in times of climate change, where we talk about global warming, and I don't think we can sort of put ourselves in a position where we say that we are not responsible for this. No, we are. We are. It's us, the humans, who are responsible for this. We live at a time where we are surrounded by waste. The entire geographical sphere that we inhabit today is littered with garbage, and I do not even know how to exactly use any kind of a nomenclature to talk about a specific type of waste. There is human waste, there is scatological waste, there is technological waste. I mean, we have basically plundered our sphere, our earth, and in turn, what we have given is just garbage and waste. The onus of that also lies on us. So, on one hand, you have all these ideological conceptions where you talk about humanity being the savior, humanity being the center. And on the other hand, we find that it is we who sort of pillage the earth. We have literally plundered everything, every raw material, every resource. I do not even know how long these raw materials are going to, these resources are going to exist. Are we looking at a world for our children? What kind of a world are we going to give our children as a form of inheritance? Now, these are very important questions which post-humanism seeks to answer. So are we looking at, as I said, a rewriting of the essence of humanism? Somewhere in Macbeth, Shakespeare talks about the milk of human kindness. And as and when he puts that term, the milk of human kindness, violence pervades the scene. So, when Shakespeare uses that term, he was being very sarcastic because he understood the basic essence of humanism is not preservation, it's basically destruction. Someone like Shakespeare, during whose time, ecological survey, or, the whole idea of ecological preservation and eco-criticism and ecofeminism was not in vogue. I mean, nobody talked about it at that particular time, but in a way, Shakespeare was a soothsayer. He looked into the future, and he was looking at how the human essence, as he said, the milk of human kindness is something that is going to destroy the world in his perception. So are we going to look at, as I say, I keep repeating this ad nauseum, are we going to look at a rewriting of the essence of humanism? Because post-humanism basically leads us towards that conclusion, which they say is a foregone conclusion. We necessarily need to do that. which also means that we come to a state that is called the anthropocentric dismantle. We need to dismantle the idea of the Anthropocene. So when I use this word, idea of the Anthropocene, you have to understand that somewhere down the line from the 17th century onwards, we have always looked at humanity, the human, the Homo sapien as being the center of everything. So basically, we are looking at how God created humanity in His likeness. So therefore, we have sort of, made humanity or the human body or the human image almost synonymous with the idea of the deity, the idea of the divine. So everything that has been created belongs to us. It's basically, we have dips on everything. We have first grabs on everything. So hasn't that sort of brought in a new world order where we have, as I said, pillaged everything that is. Imagine how many species have gone extinct. Imagine how many species are going extinct every day. Imagine how much of greenery has become erased. Yeah, even the Amazon is losing its greenery. Every day, trees are being cut in the Amazon green forest, and it's becoming browner. It's no longer the green that we sort of, when we were children, the kind of vision of the Amazon that we had, that's basically being destroyed. So that is a very important central tenet when it comes to posthumanism. How much has the centrality of the Anthropocene destroyed the earth as we know? So, in a sense, see, one thing is posthumanism is such an umbrella term. There are so many different aspects where, there are so many different posthumanist theorists who would like to showcase one particular aspect of posthumanism and say that, no, this is what posthumanism actually entails. But I think as students, I would rather see myself as a student of critical theory rather than being a master or a teacher of it. So I think all of us as students of critical theory, we need to take a sort of a consortium of all the theories put together and present them to our students, the future generation, so that they have a kind of an understanding that would be based not just on theory, but on praxis. So my firm conclusion when it comes to any form of a critical theory is that we need not only necessarily bandy the terms, but rather we try to apply these terms in practical, pragmatic life. That's what praxis is all about. So that is the way I'm going to look at posthumanism also. So every theory, every critical theory has to start with a kind of a justification of its implications. So that exactly is what I have been trying to do in this very first slide of mine, because I think the idea of posthumanism, though it might, as I said, it's an umbrella term, it takes a lot of different concepts and parameters from so many different sociological implications. But I think where we need to focus its concentration on is how it is logically consistent with the advent of critical theory that we have to sort of decentralize ourselves from the world in general. So, any critical theory is something that talks about a sort of an appropriation of the earlier margin to the center and the center to the margin. Basically, it's like, the empire writes back, or the critical theory talks back, something like that. So if you have to put posthumanism out there, then I think posthumanism is basically where we decentralize the notion of the human primary importance that we have firmly associated with society and sociology. So I hope we have sort of moved from the initial inhibitions which present themselves to us because I think that is necessary when we move to the next. As the Anthropocene, as anthropocentric, sorry, having the human in focus, what has terra firma achieved till now? That's a very interesting question. When we put ourselves in the center, when we see that, when we say that we are of primary importance, that we are the most important, what happens obviously is that there is a sort of a subjugation, a marginalization, or the othering of what we would say is a non-human entity. So we have this firm conviction that the world has been created for us. So whatever has been created after us and parallel to us exists in as much only for our own sakes. So whether it is the flora or the fauna, whether it is the rich minerals and resources that are available on earth, everything belongs to us. So we see them as commodities that we can utilize for our furtherance. So it could be for food, it could be for pleasure, it could be for sport, it could be just for a willful human behavior, sadistic pleasure in destruction, like those sailors who set foot on that island and just completely destroyed all the dodos. I mean, they were harmless birds, but they were inedible, they were not tasty. But the entire populace which landed on that island necessarily had to kill it because they felt that they could do so. They had the right to. Isn't that what we have been doing with almost every species that has become extinct till today and which is going to become extinct in the near future? That comes out of, as I said, a firm belief that the world belongs to us. So please to understand, when we other the non-human entities, it naturally goes without saying, it's an automatic response that once we have othered the non-human entities, we also move further and other those who are not like us, right? So based on color, based on community, based on culture, based on, lifestyle, based on cuisine, based on a perception of life or the perception of world per se, what we do is we very easily marginalize and remove them from any kind of a terrorism. So every cultural theory has been in response to this kind of marginalization or this kind of othering. So let's talk about Marxism, let's talk about feminism, let's talk about post-structuralism, let's talk about post-colonialism, let's talk about new historicism or cultural materialism. Everywhere we find that the critical theory comes as a reaction to the othering of a particular culture or a particular strata of society. I'm sure you agree with me on that. So, we follow this process of exclusion or the process of what we would say, having a very normative idea of things without giving it a second thought. It's part of our nature. We always exclude, we always, sort of keep things away from the ontological set where we would like to define ourselves. Derrida talked about this in Structure, Sign and Play when he says that we need to dismantle the Western myth of what he said was phallologocentrism. The idea of the masculine supremacy and the idea of rational logical thought as being supreme, because he says that is the epistemology of Western civilization. And though we are not Western by any inch, unfortunately, what we are doing today is that we are also following the Western imperative. I'm talking about people like us, even Indians, people who are so far away from the Western imperatives, but yet we have come to take that for granted. So that, my dear friends, is the kind of a normative assumption that we need to dismantle. I know many of us, even academicians would like to see Derrida as the black angel, as M.H. Apples puts it. But Derrida is one of the first to tell us that look beyond the normative, look beyond the absolute, look beyond the monolithic. So that exactly is what posthumanism is also trying to pinpoint to us, is also trying to emphasize to us, that please look beyond the normative. This, if you agree with, it's also going to link to point B, where from non-human, we are also going to go for marginalization of the other humans also. You remember that famous poem by a German poet, where he says that, first they came for the communists. I didn't bother. I was not a communist. Next, they came for the Jews. I didn't bother. I was not a Jew. But then they came for us. And nobody bothered because there was no one left to support me. I'm kind of paraphrasing. The idea of the centrality of humanity per se also leads us to the idea of the centrality of some form of humanity as against the other forms of humanity. As George Orwell puts it, in Animal Farm, he says that, in a democracy, some animals are superior to the other, are more democratic than the other. Something like that. It always leads that any kind of an exclusivity will always come back to us. So that is something that we have achieved till now. Look at the state of our world today. Are we happy? Are we equal? Is there any kind of a parity? Sad to say that it's not. It's our human nature to segregate. It's our human nature to exclude. It's our human nature to either put others in the ghetto or form a ghetto ourselves. So, my dear friends, it's a norm that naturally follows from there. Aren't we talking about how this ground beneath our feet belongs to us? It belongs to everyone. I think that should be the norm, right? It belongs to every creature that has been created, every creature that inhabits the earth. It should belong to all of us equally. But somewhere down the line, we have assumed that we are the primary. We are the absolute. And all other things have been created only for us. So, they put the beginning of the Anthropocene almost 1,17,230 years earlier with the extinction of the dinosaurs. So once the dinosaurs were wiped out in the Ice Age, what happens is naturally the next dominant species starts inhabiting the earth and started flourishing. So that's exactly where we come in. But remember, our tenure on earth has always been genocidal. For us, the human species that identifies with the terminology Homo sapien to survive and flourish, please understand that we started our very origin on earth with a genocide against every other human species which coexisted along with us. So life begins with genocide. Our superiority on this earth has begun with genocide. And once we have established dominion, what we have done is that only ensure the erasure of every other species right here that exists parallel to us. My dear friends, I don't think that's a great achievement. Mass killing, genocide, extinction. I think these are the three terms which sort of define us. As I said, I don't think that's very flattering. That's not something that is very appreciable. So, if you agree with me, then we need to understand posthumanism. We need to adapt posthumanism. We need to practice posthumanism as a sort of a critical theory. So that is the justification that I'm going to add to that. And of course, if you're talking about this simmering pot of exclusion and of violence and genocide and mass destruction, I think we need to add this very special ingredient that we have come up with, and that's technology. Right from the time we discovered fire or we invented the wheel, ours has been a sort of astonishing, very rapid development that we find. In almost 10,000 years, we have reached here where technology is at its zenith. And when I use this term technology as it is at its zenith, I mean that technology is something that keeps evolving every single second. As we talk on Zoom platform, I'm sure the people who are responsible for Zoom are at this very time coming up with an update. So there is a high possibility that the time we finish by 2:30 and we move on to the next session, there is a possibility that Zoom would have been upgraded. My phone would have been upgraded, the apps would have been upgraded. We are moving at a blinding speed towards what? Where is this technology going to take us? It's a very pertinent question. It's a very interesting question. It's a very controversial question because many futurologists and technology experts, like, for example, science fiction writer Vernon Winch, he says that we are moving rapidly towards what is a technological singularity. Now, what does he mean by technological singularity? Is that particular moment in time, that particular pulse in time when technology is going to overcome us. He actually puts it another 120 years from now. So from the time we spoke about it, I think something around 60 years have elapsed. So we have another 60 years to go. So it might probably be beyond my time. I might not be existing on Earth. I might not be alive to see that particular term or time, the time frame when singularity is going to burst and technology is going to become manifest over us. But maybe our children, maybe the future generation might be able to see that. What is its implications going to be? A very interesting question, because if Vernon Winch is right, we would have lost the war to the machines. Right from the 1980s onwards, people have been sort of talking about an apocalyptic incident where we would have lost to the machines. We versus them, humans versus machines. If I ask you a very general question, who is superior, or who is more intelligent, or who would probably survive an apocalypse, I'm sure you would say that we will. We humans, we are responsible for technology. We are the ones who have built technology. We are the ones who create technology. So we are the masters of technology. Therefore, it goes without saying that we are the people who are the masters of machines also. Maybe for our generation, maybe for my generation, the digital immigrants, maybe. But I'm not sure how many of the contemporary generation, the youngsters of today would naturally agree with this, because I think in some way or the other, they have sort of accepted the superiority of machines over us. I mean, they cannot survive without their mobile phones. They cannot survive without technology. Let's say that, suddenly there is a sun flare, which is a very probable natural event. Flares from the sun are going to disintegrate everything, every technology that is possible on Earth. And if that happens, it's a possibility that might happen. Can you imagine life on Earth without technology? If that sort of happens, I don't know how many of the people would actually commit suicide, because I don't think they can even envisage a world without technology. I don't think they can even envisage a world without their smartphones or their laptops or all the softwares. So I'm sort of retconning the entire question that Vernon Winge is asking us when he says that another 60 years down the line, the singularity is going to happen, technological singularity is going to happen. I'm retconning it, I'm bringing it down to 2022 and asking this question. I need us to ponder, think about it, contemplate it, please meditate over it. Have we already lost the war to the machines? Are we the dominant species on Earth even today, or have we lost to the next species that is there, and that is the machines? I'm not going to elicit any answers from you on this. As I said, I just want us to ponder over it. Can we think of a life without machines? If you think, and if you are firmly of the conviction that we can lead a life without machines, then what, hats off to you. I would say that you would not be part of any kind of a technological singularity, because you are a person who has self-sustenance and you can live, if that is your firm conviction. Because I have a gut feeling that maybe it's an answer that you would be giving only to please the audience or to please the superficial, but within ourselves, we might be actually asking ourselves this very fearful question, that what if Jinnah is right? And what if the singularity has actually come? So again, I'm going to paraphrase media theorists like Alvin Toffler, who talks about how humanity has developed in 3 waves. This book of his, where he talks about the 3rd wave. He talks about how technology has helped humanity sort of become what we are in 3 waves. So from the discovery of fire to, let's say, the invention of the printing press, from the invention of the printing press to the early part of the 21st century, 20th century, where we have computers and multimedia developing, and then from there onwards till date, where technology has been sort of, as I said earlier, recording very rapid growth. So if that is so, he also talks about the idea of the 4th wave in another of his books, which is called Future Shock. He says technology would develop to such a level that, I'm going to bring someone like Nostradamus also here, to such a level that the world will be flattened. And that, in a way, we have seen, friends. We are talking about the use of nuclear missiles. We're talking about nuclear fusion and nuclear fission. Something, which began in the 1940s with some of the finest brains that inhabited the earth. Scientists who are supposedly burdened with the responsibility of making life on earth, let's say, better, more comfortable, more peaceful. But it is these scientists who also go on and use these technologies to create weapons of mass destruction. So are we, asking this question again, are we witnessing a Nostradamus event? Because Nostradamus, the Greek, let me put him in a very new terminology, the Greek futurologist said that the 3rd World War would be fought only with stones. Of course, he never used the term 3rd World War, but he said that, let's say, an event of such cataclysmic magnitude would be fought, and that would be followed by humans going back to the the cave age. So are we sort of looking at a future where our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren maybe would be a return back to the tide where we started as cavemen and barbarians, where we got together as a hunting community, where we had spears and wooden sticks and large stones rather than all these technological weaponry that we have today. Because I think the natural and foregone conclusion of having so many weapons of mass destruction is basically that mass destruction. We are going to destroy ourselves. We are going to. So how much has technology actually helped us, or rather has it hindered our life on earth, is a question that posthumanism always seeks to give a satisfactory answer to. But unfortunately, my dear friends, there is no singular satisfactory answer to that particular question. So as I said, it's more about bringing these things out to the forefront and talking about these things, discussing these things, looking at the plausible conclusions of all these ideologies and all these advancements that humanity has actually brought in on the planet. So that's exactly what we are going to do. Now, any discussion of posthumanism always has to stop at a very watershed event that happens in 1985 with the publication of a manifesto. Posthumanists always talk in manifestos. There are at least 3 manifestos which are very essential when it comes to posthumanism. I'm pointing out the first of those manifestos. It's called the Manifesto of Cyborgism, or the Cyborg Manifesto. I'm sure all of us know that a cyborg is a kind of a hybrid between humans and robots. So basically, it's how human intelligence and artificial intelligence are sort of infused together to create something new. So one direction in which posthumanism goes is where we talk about the idea of post-humanity. Remember, in critical theory, the term post is always used in 2 different ways. One is something that follows, and the other, something that is a reaction to the earlier. So if I have to talk about something like postmodernism, obviously the chronological marker is that postmodernism is something that follows modernism, yes, but it's also something that is a reaction to modernism. So it's both after and anti. Similarly, for post-colonialism also, it's something that follows post-colonialism, but at the same time, it's also a reaction against the earlier theory of colonialism. So post-feminism or post-structuralism, any post for that matter, I think that is something that we have to identify post-humanism also, because it's something that follows the era of humanism, the era of sort of whitewashing the crimes of humanity. So it's something that follows, but at the same time, it's also something that goes against the essentialism that was so prevalent in the age of humanism, in the age of enlightenment. So basically, when I use this term cyborg, it's a kind of a paradoxical term wherein we sort of infuse humanity with something that follows, or something that is also an it's anti-humanistic. So we are talking about robots, or we are talking about we are talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about androids, we are talking about a sort of an enhancement where humanity or the human body or the human consciousness is in a way prolonged, in a way changed, in a way transformed. Now, this is very essential. As Donna Haraway puts it, she says that, we need to do this because all through the 300 years of, having humanism as the primary project, what we have been doing is that we have always been using the idea of a binary opposition to sort of exclude. So human versus animal, human versus the plants. It's always we put humans on top and animals and plants as subsidiary. So this is something which someone like Derrida also talks about. It's something which the French feminists have also talked about, where they talk about death-dealing binary oppositions, where they say that the placement of the initial of the primary is always to the death of the secondary. So man, woman, right? White, black, day, night. So whenever we have an opposition, we always see to it that the first term becomes primary, becomes the center, and the next term becomes the other, becomes the marginals. So Donna Haraway is talking about an erasure of these binary oppositions, because only an erasure of the binary oppositions leads to what she calls is the celebration of the hybrid. In today's terminology, remember, we are talking about the erasure of the man-woman binary, and we are talking about at least an inclusion of man, woman, and let's say a very euphemistic term, something like neuter, which I think might not be politically correct in today's terms. I'm sorry, times, because we need to identify that there are so many different LGBTQ plus. It's a rainbow. It's more than a rainbow. So what terminology are we going to use there is a problematic, but at least there is a sort of a reconciliation that is happening, because at least we are using that term. Because I remember when I was young, when I was a school student, when I was going to college, there were only two terminologies which were there, the binary oppositions. There was not the third. It's either you're a man or you're a woman. What if you are an in-between? What if you are, let's say, a hybrid, somewhere in between? That was never considered, but at least today we have started sort of at least acknowledging that. So that is the kind of acknowledgement that Donna Haraway is also asking in that cyborg manifesto, because she says we are no longer autonomous identities. We are cyborgs. I mean, this is seen to be your sixth finger. You ask the generation of today, they would say that they cannot survive without this, the machine, the smartphone which they have. So in a way, if they say that they cannot survive without the smartphone, aren't they in some way or the other a cyborg? Because they have sort of supplanted the human digit, the human finger, for the sixth finger, that is the smartphone. So that is the kind of a question that that's a problematic, of course, which Donna Haraway is trying to answer in her own way in the cyborg manifesto. Because I think with the age of enlightenment, we have also started looking at the body as a sort of a shell which cocoons, or which sort of covers or protects something which we say is more integral, which is more essential, and that is, I don't know, the concept of the soul or the concept of the mind. If you're a scientist, I think you would talk about how the body sort of is a protection, a shell for the brain, and if you're a spiritualist, you would say it's sort of a protection for the soul. Whatever it is, the body is something that is considered to be inferior, secondary, and it's something that is a metaphysical, I think, ontology which is inside us, which we consider to be superior. Have you ever seen our soul? Is a question which I cannot be asking, because I think some of us might be offended. The soul cannot be seen, but the soul is there. It's a question of faith. We need to have that, right? So that is something which Donna Haraway addresses when she asks this question: is a real separation? I mean, we might have seen that in movies, right? Where the conscience just pops out of the body, and the conscience and the human body, the entity of the body, the corporeal, they sort of have this kind of a ideological debate, something that's very Hamletian, a kind of a soliloquy, basically, where we have these two soul and the body talking to each other, arguing with each other, coming up with feasible ideas, in their discussions. I know it might sound funny, but in many ways, we have sort of developed a soul for ourselves where we keep talking to. But how far is this a tangible reality is the question that Donna Haraway is asking. She says, if it is a tangible reality, then I believe, she says, that, this whole idea of a multiplicity is something that is also very, very tangible. So I think we need to address this in a very different way. When Einstein died, they had a problem with his brain because Einstein was supposedly the most intelligent person to have ever inhabited the earth. Right? So Einstein's dead. But they wanted to understand the idea of Einstein's intelligence because Einstein's intelligence was not in his body per se. It was in something that was, encased here behind his skull, and that was the brain. So, I don't know, certain scientists, they started questioning as to if we would be able to preserve Einstein's brain till an eventuality when the brain might be able to become an autonomous unit by itself. That is, the brain would be able to function by itself. It's a stuff straight out of science fiction horror, if you ask me. But it was something that was done. They actually removed his brain and they preserved his brain. They actually cut it into 140 pieces and they were sent all around the world. It still survives. It's still there, in those canisters. As I said, it's a stuff straight out of Gothic fiction because people still hold on to sort of a hypothetical future where there is a possibility that that brain might, with the advent of technology and futurical science, be able to function autonomously on its own. Then if the brain does function, if we are able to sort of revive Einstein's brain, and if we are sort of able to make it function, does that mean that Einstein is alive? A very interesting question, because we have actually buried Einstein. He's there in his grave. Or maybe he's cremated. I'm not very sure about that. The finality of Einstein's body. But we are talking about the finality of Einstein as an identity. So where exactly does our identity lie is a very interesting question, because does it lie in what we are, this body, this face, which is familiar, let's say, to a minute populace, or is it here in the creativity, in the process of intelligence and super intelligence? Now that is a question, because if Einstein's brain in the near future is in some way or the other made alive, then are we actually creating a Frankensteinian monster? It's nightmarish if you ask me, but what if it is possible? That is a question that science is asking us nowadays. That, as I said, is a stuff of nightmare, but coming down to practical realities and the pragmatics of it, we are talking about a convergence of humans and machines. Aren't we aware of pacemakers? The heart is not able to function normally. Then science has actually advanced to such a stage that you can actually fit in a machine here called the pacemaker, and it's the pacemaker that prolongs, let's say, the survival of that particular individual. So that is a way in which technology has actually enhanced human life. We talk about nanotechnology, which has moved to such a technological rapid development that these tiny bots would be able to surgically change our human body. There are places in the human body which are so delicate, which are so small that the human digits, the human fingers or human intelligence would not be able to go and, surgically intervene and save. So they are talking about nano robots, which probably, would flow through your bloodstream or, through your nerves, and they would be able to cure. It's a possibility. It's happening. So on one hand, we find that technology has actually enhanced human life. We talk about Pistorius, who has lost both his legs, but he has these blades which he fits onto his body, and he is one of the fastest men when he fits those blades. So as I said, technology has in many ways enhanced human lives, but on the other hand, people are asking questions as to someone like Francis Fukuyama, for example. He asked, have we lost the human touch? With so much of rapid machinization of our body and of our personalities, are we in any way humans? Now, this is a question which I'm not sure Fukuyama actually wants an answer to, because he has this sort of, how do I put it, this idealistic idea of, the greatness of humanity. But let's talk from our own experiences. It's a great thing that I'm talking to you over a Zoom platform online. I just have a laptop in front of me, and we must be separated by thousands of kilometers, but yet we are connected. That's a good thing. But can we sort of equate that with, people like Apple Industries, or, some of those great corporates out there who are systematically trying to dismantle the idea of a classroom? So we have AppCod, which started, Apple Classrooms of Tomorrow, which started in the 1980s. They have been having this project right from 1980s, where they are looking at the transformation of a classroom into a virtual classroom. And you know what, COVID has made that possible for us. We are doing it now. I think if it had not been for COVID, for this refresher course, I would have traveled over to Nagpur, and probably I would have met you in person. So as they say, something always good happens. If that's the way you have to look at it, then, COVID has actually transformed the entire idea of a classroom, the entire idea of human interaction, and we are interacting now. But there are people who are asking this question, would that suffice for a classroom? Because in a classroom, they say that we need what is called a human touch. After 3 semesters of attending online classrooms, when my students finally came over to the physical classrooms, to the offline classrooms, they felt disconnected, they felt disoriented. And I'm not sure that, this break, this barrier that has been created, would ever, at least in the foreseeable future, be sort of, I don't know, cleared or, remended. I'm not sure. So yes, technology has sort of enhanced us, technology has helped us, but in that, are we in the process of becoming someone like Deleuze and Guattari? They would say that we are in the process of becoming a post-human Superman. Now, this goes against the grain of something like Nietzsche, Nietzsche's idea of a Superman, or, even Bernard Shaw's idea of the superego, is not the concept that Deleuze and Guattari are talking about. We are talking about how the next stage of transformation from what we are to what we are going to become. In that process of becoming, he says, or rather they say, that we are on the process of becoming what they call Superman. So in a way, for the children out there, who have grown up reading the comics of MCU, and, have sort of fallen in love, let's say, with the exploits of people like Hulk, or, Iron Man, or Spider-Man, which when it began probably would have been just scientific fantasies, but in some way we are looking at ideas of super warriors today, which I'm sure are very closely associated with the idea of Iron Man. So are we becoming that? I think eugenics has probably given us, or rather some of us, the solution for creating a perfect human being. But I think we also need to take the naysayers here, because they say that in all this, in all these ideas where we play God, is it a possibility that we are actually destroying humanity per se? These two ideas are floating, my dear friends. We just, as I said, we need to at least, contemplate over that. It's not about choosing which is right or wrong, because if you say that I'm going to choose between these two, then again, where we are going back is the idea of a monolithic, the idea of an absolute, where I think we are dismantling the project of plurality, which has been in vogue right from the time of post-structuralism. So let's not do that, but let's always have a look at the other side also, because another, a very popular social theorist today, that is Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about how in this process of transformation, humanity has sort of superseded the earlier human Homo sapien, and we are in the process of becoming what he calls is the Homo Deus. So Homo sapien was the intelligent human. Homo Deus is the God human. We are in the process, he says, of becoming God. Okay, for some of us, it might be very flattering. For some of us, we would be actually having goosebumps that we are in the process of becoming God. But I think we need to take it with a pinch of salt, because how exactly are we becoming God? That's a very interesting question. Let's take, for example, a paradox that is created by Tesla. Tesla, Elon Musk and his company, Tesla Cars, is coming up with super intelligent cars. We have cruise control, of course, in its infancy in India, but the idea of cruise control and automated driving is something that Tesla is taking far beyond the realms of human thought. So, on one hand, you have Tesla creating cars which would be able to decide for themselves. So what kind of a car is Tesla creating? Now, this is a conjecture. We are talking about two different types of cars. One is the Tesla altruist and the other is the Tesla egoist. Now, it all depends on the situation. Let's say you're driving, let's say you and your wife, or rather two of you, you're driving on the road, and suddenly there is an eventuality that there are two children crossing the road, and it's beyond your comprehension because the car is automated. So the car has to decide. So either the car has to save the children, but because in that saving, it means that the people who are driving the car, they will die. So it's a matter of choice, right? It's a matter of choice. What does the car do? Does it save you and in the process kill those two children? Or does it save the children and in that process kill you, the driver and his spouse? Now that is the catch-22 question. What would you choose? Are you an altruist or are you an egoist? Now, this is a question when it comes to humanity, we probably might not ponder that much because we would say that, human choice. But how about if this choice is handed over to the machine? Because remember, the machine is not going to use any factor that is called sympathy or empathy or, the essence of the milk of human kindness. What it is going to use is simply an algorithm. A construct of variables based on which it is going to come up with a sort of a solution. It might sound frightening, but my dear friends, We're already living in the age of algorithm where the machines or the software or all your, apps and their platforms, they are actually deciding what we need to do. So we talk about human action, human initiative, and uh, decisiveness, which is there in humanity. My question is, are we any more decisive, or do we leave the choice to our phones? I mean, let's say, something like the iWatch, for example. People have started wearing iWatch uh, 24 hours because the iWatch has the capacity to decide if you're having a heart attack or not. And if it feels that you're having a heart attack, or if it feels that you're fallen down and you need help, it immediately sends an SOS. So I don't think we need to even bother about, is my heart beating properly? Is there a irregularity? Is my heart missing a step, a skip? We don't have to bother that. The iWatch is going to sort of decide for you. So how is it going to decide based on what? And if that is so, then what is the next process? As I said, have we already lost the war to machines? Because if the iWatch is going to decide, my dear friends, where are we? Are we sort of in an era of digital dictatorship? Is a very interesting and a very pertinent question, because I think there was a time when we were sort of imbibed with natural directional modes, but today we have completely lost that because we don't bother to look at the roads at all. We have GPS, we have Google Maps, we have, if you're having an Apple Watch, iPhone, you have Apple Maps, and you know what? It decides for you which turn to take. Should I take a left or a right? It's no longer decided by you. It's not decided by your human observation. It is decided by the app. Many a times, we must have thought that, okay, what, I'm not going to depend on this. I'm not going to believe this. I'm going to take a left. And you might have gone left and you might have found yourself, caught in a traffic jam or something. And that would have probably given you a consciousness. Oh my God, human error. I made a human error. The machine is not going to make that error. You have lost the war. Are our smartphones actually smartphones, or are they spyware? Have you ever felt creeped out that you do a Google search on something and then you go over to Amazon, or and it gives you a preferred choice? It shows you that particular product which you have probably Googled out just 5 minutes earlier. Coincidence, you might think, but many of us would be actually creeped out. You must be thinking, oh my God, I just Googled this out, and how is this coming onto me? It's almost in your face. So is it a spyware or your smartphone? If, my dear friends, we have already lost the war, because we are no longer customers. We are the products. Let's talk about data mining. Let's talk about how our preferences. It's a kind of a brainwashing that's happening to us. The absolute explosion of products that are thrown onto our faces. We are no longer the customers. In fact, we are the products. We are being sold. So have we lost the war to the machines? That's an interesting question, as he said. So where do we go from here? Is it safe to say that technology is the new God? Is it safe to say that we are now inhibiting a brave new world? But it's not a brave new world where the humans are the primary. Is it a brave new world of big television and even bigger irrationality? What we seek, what we desire is no longer our own desires. It's products that are sort of imploded onto you, as I said, in your face. And how much has technology helped us? Doctor like Atul Gawande asked this question: why don't we die? One aspect of being Homo Deus, for example, is where we have sort of prolonged our lives. Nowadays, it's so easy for us to live 100 years. All because of all these amazing breakthroughs in medical technology. Right? In fact, Google has actually started a kind of a platform called Calico. What is the purpose of that? They are seeking to remove death. The very project Calico has been started to remove death. You just hark back to the earlier slide. Are we playing God? Yeah, we are. Homo Deus. We are playing God. But what are we creating? Where do we go from here? Sure. Because again, two very important social theorists, Lauro and Embry, they have actually come up with another manifesto. Remember, I was telling you about three important manifestos. One is Donna Haraway's the cyborg manifesto. The second, which I'm just pointing out here, is the zombie manifesto. All of us know zombies. Zombies are huge today. Zombies are big business. In media, in literature, in everywhere, zombies. TV serials. The Koreans are actually making huge money out of zombie stories and narratives. So the zombies are huge. Everyone is aware of a zombie, but please understand that the zombie, as we see today, the fantastical creature, the living dead, something that rises from the grave and is basically undead. It cannot be killed unless you shoot it in the brains, which is a paradox because it survives on eating brains. So you understand the whole logic of that horror, zombie horror, actually comes from an actual fact, because in Haiti, the Caribbean island of Haiti, zombies are real. There is a particular type of a root which people, when they ingest, when they eat, they turn into zombies. That's a reality. It's ZOMBII. That's a reality. And from this reality, we have created a creature. But in that creation of a creature, we are asking a post-humanist question. Forget that fantastical creature which we see, inhabiting social media or, your media scapes. Lauren and Embry are sort of asking a question: have we actually become zombies? Because a zombie is something that is basically dead. It doesn't have human emotions. It doesn't have human values. It cannot feel. It cannot cry. It's basically something that is absolutely removed from the idea of the human. It's inhuman. My dear friends, have we actually become inhuman as a person? Does anything evoke our sympathy? Do we actually feel, sad at the plight of others? Again, as I said, you don't have to give me an answer, but I need you to ponder over it, because I know for a fact that whenever an accident or something happens, there are people who crowd around that accident. There's someone dead there. Yeah? There's a dead body, someone's father, I don't know, someone's mother, someone on whom people are dependent. You see that dead body and you shoot pictures of that, and then you pass it on in social media. You put that as an Instagram feed, or you sort of give it as a forward, and based on that, people are giving you likes or comments, emoticons. Now, if we are guilty of that, just being not just the sender but the receiver and someone who gives a thumbs up, or it's a, I don't know, an emoticon or an acronym. If that is so, the question is, are we really humans or have we become zombies? Look at our children. Do they actually sympathize anymore? If they do not, is there a possibility that it's because of the way that we have lost ourselves in, the kind of overkill of media exposure and simulated violence? Because look at the games that children play, look at, the kind of serials that children watch. It's all about violence. It's all about, the absolute depravity of human life and society. Sometime back, before it was banned, PUBG was the most popular game, right? We have games where, people actually have simulated guns in their hand, and the only target is to kill as many people as possible. So, are we zombies? Because if we are, then I think we have lost that war. And look at our kids. Are our kids children anymore? I think our kids are far more aware of the world than we probably would have been at our ages. So we are surrounded by all this. So obviously in literature also you find that, all these find a part of the narrative. So in literature, since we are all students of literature, I think in literature, how post-human turns happen is, in science fiction and fantasy, you find, the idea of going beyond the human, altered consciousness, going beyond an altered personality, the creation of hybrids, of robots, of, robotic manipulations, of, aliens fusing into humans with anime, manga, graphic novels, science fiction, dystopian stories, even science fiction fantasy, for example, like, the children as they grew up reading the stories of the Divergent series, or, something like Twilight. Or we can talk about, groundbreaking novels like Neuromancer, where we talk about, cyberpunk, man and the machine fusing together. Or today we talk about, how ghost stories, Gothic narratives have been actually transformed by the post-human turn. So there's a very interesting novel called Frankenstein in Baghdad, where, the earlier story of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, is transplanted into Iraq. And, the civil war in Iraq, which was basically funded by a Western imperialist ideology, you will find that, it's sort of parallel to that story of Frankenstein and the actual war and trauma which is happening right here in real. Then, of course, we have all those monster and entity fiction. For example, in Japan, they have an entire sub-genre that is called the kanji narrative, which deals with movies which are very popular today, like, for example, Godzilla, or, King Kong, or the Mothra movies. Sometimes you'll have a crossover movie where, as it came out, in the last couple of years. In fact, it's also called Monster House movies, where they're bringing all these kanjis together. But Godzilla might be an overrated, huge, gigantic monster. But how Godzilla is created is very interesting, because Godzilla is actually a product of nuclear, testing that was happening in Papua New Guinea by all those, the Western nations which wanted nuclear superpowers. So you understand, it's basically we who have destroyed. So the understanding of this, the awareness of this is what I think is the logic on which posthumanism actually operates. Now, I would also like to point that, there are a lot of confusions when it comes to transhumanism and posthumanism. Transhumanism is basically where Donna Haraway makes the beginning and probably ends also, where she talks about, how there is a transmutation of human and the machine. Now, that is transhumanism, where we're talking about the human body becoming technologically advanced, or maybe, in a way it's reductive because of the advent of technology. Both ways you can see. Because one aspect, we were talking about the singularity. There is another aspect of futurology which says that man has become so dependent on machines that maybe in the near future our bodies would not be this way. I mean, we always undergo a process of evolution, right? So our bodies might not be this way, or our skulls would be bigger, our hands would be shorter, our legs would be shorter, and the trunk would be shorter. Because today it's all about having things on your hand. I mean, you don't even walk to the TV to change the channels, right? All you have is a remote and you surf from, let's say, sitting on your couch. So basically, we have become couch potatoes. So how our bodies are going to be in the near future, according to futurology, is that a big skull to shell the brain, which needs to be rapid, and all your externalities like your limbs and your legs, they are probably going to be shortened because we are not going to use them. So in any way, that's one aspect of transhumanism. But transhumanism, posthumanism is something that goes beyond that. It goes beyond that and it looks at this philosophical parameters. For example, what have we done with ourselves? What have we done with the world? I know it's a question that is too late. I remember, at the beginning of the quarantine, there was a time when people were saying that, nature is reviving ourselves because we were at home. We were basically quarantined at home. We were not going out. So fogs were clearing, rivers were becoming cleaner. Nature was actually healing herself. But you see, as long as we intervene, it's not going to happen. So we have gone back to our basics. So we are never going to learn a lesson. So I think you would agree with me when I say that we have squandered our chances. We could have done so much better, but we have squandered our chances and we are not going to get a second chance. So maybe it's more of a wishful thinking. Maybe we need to have that because there are people who say that, we need to go back from the Anthropocene to, other ways of inhabiting the earth. For example, a zoo scene. It's not going to happen as long as we are the masters of this sphere of this earth. But maybe a zoo scene where animals are given, the fauna and the flora are given the centrality, and we are sort of relegated to the margins. Not going to happen, but it's a wishful thinking, as I said. And someone like Donna Haraway even finally goes on and talks about the idea of the Thulhu scene. Now, the Thulhu is a primordial monster, something that was created by a horror fiction writer like H.P. Lovecraft, who talks about, before the world being inhabited by all these species, what would have existed before? So he talks about primordial monsters, which are nameless, faceless, dimensionless, which he gave a name, call it the Thulu. No pronunciations. So Donna Haraway actually wants us to go back to that. As I said, I'm not sure how much this is going to happen, but maybe it's just for us to ponder, contemplate. So these are some of the observations by some very important theorists. Rosie Bradotti is probably the most known name of posthumanism today. She has written a book, a monumental book that is called Posthuman. She offers courses on posthuman critical theory online. If anyone of you wants to register, hers is a summer course. You can always register once a year. It's tough to get into it, but it's really worthwhile. So she talks about how we need to decentralize the idea of this. Or the third manifesto is Robert Pepperell's The Posthumanist Manifesto, where he says that we have to be very clear that the human beings are not the most important things. We need to have that. We need to understand that. We need to accept that, acknowledge that. We need to, overcome our resistance to that. We are no longer the most important thing in the world. Or someone like Carrie Wolf, in Animal Bites, a very profound book. He says that as long as we take it for granted that humans can exploit animals and birds and human resources, then naturally it follows that this exploitation would move on to other forms of human exploitation also. The logic on which I started this discussion. So have that in your mind. So we have reached the end. You know what? I didn't even know how these 90 minutes actually went. Thank you so much. It was so interesting talking to you. But in conclusion, I need to tell you that since we are the people who reach out to students on literature, on narrative, it's also our accountability and our responsibility to give them critical theory. Every form of critical theory, not just as a distanced ideological collection of jargons, but we need to give it to them, to our students, in a way that they understand that this is essential for us to understand the world. Sorry. For us to understand the world, for us to live in this world and to make this world a better place. So based on that, dear friends, I'm going to posit that posthumanism is the philosophy of language, because it seeks to dismantle, as I said, our centrality. We need to understand that posthumanism tells us that we exist in a world of co-constitution. We are not in isolation. We are not independent of everything. Every action has a reaction. And the way we have squandered, the way we have pillaged, the way we have destroyed, it's going to have its implications. We cannot any longer think that we live independently. Rather, we need to understand firmly that we live interdependent. And this means that we are interdependent on everything, including the people whom you hate. You understand that's a natural progression, hatred, which comes out of a sense of superiority and exclusion. So please understand that, because non-human, inhuman, and post-human terms are absolutely essential. Everything is essential. So that is what I would like to end with. That's called the dance of agency. It's in our hands. We need to be the active agents of change. So once we see the downfall of humanity, the death of humanity, it's not the kind of a death which someone like Foucault or someone like Roland Barthes talk about. The death of the author, the death of man. It's not anti-humanist; it's post-humanist. When I say the death of humanity, I mean that we are talking about the death of an idea of centrality. Once we accept that, we move on to the next thing that is called the dance of agency, where we bring in a very positive change to the society. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was really a complete new dimension in literary arena. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for those words of appreciation.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I have one question, sir.
Yeah, Mahendra Kumar, sir. Yeah.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, Dr. Mahendra Kumar. Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question is that is only the technology responsible for destroying the humanity, or any other aspects are also there?
Are you asking me, is technology responsible for the death of humanity?
Yes, sir.
Well, not in that way. I mean, we are not dying, we are actually living, right? Technology has sort of ensured that our life on Earth is sort of elongated. We're living longer, we are living more healthy, and all these supplements, medicine is also a technological intervention. So all these supplements are actually making us live longer and live better But I think the question is not about that. As Atul Gawande asks, why are we living longer? What are we sort of achieving by living longer? I mean, all we are doing is elongating our life here. And in what way is this elongation of life actually helping? Let's say society, let's say, forget society, forget humanity. In what way is it actually helping the world in general? That is the question that posthumanists are asking. They say it's better you die rather than, sort of, as I say, squander everything on the earth.
आशीष मैंने वो 6 नाम भेजे, उनको co-host करना है, presentation वाले हैं वो. Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Mahendra.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, any questions of the participants, sir? Or may I deliver vote of thanks? Okay, sir. Sir, I am Dr. Mahendra Kumar, and first of all, good afternoon to one and all, and I am here to deliver vote of thanks. On behalf of HRDC Nagpur University and all the participants of RC in English, I heartedly thank you, sir, for enlightening us and giving us the knowledge of awareness on post-humanism and technology. Sir, you told us that first of all, we need to be human, and we should adopt humanity, humanism. We need to practice humanism first. Sir, you told us that we are advancing towards technology, but we are going to become post-human Superman. And sir, you in fact enlightened us with your very enlightening lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.